Colleagues, please, it's 2 o'clock. Kindly take your seats. We're about to start. Before we get going on the agenda, picking up on item 23.3, just a little household announcement. The Asian region meeting will take place tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. in room 9. So the Asian region will have a meeting just for the Asian region tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. in room 9. Thank you.
Guinea-Bissau, is there a comment you'd like to make? I see that your flag is virtually raised.
Sorry, one more householding announcement. The revised working program has been available since this morning. So you will see the changes that you agreed to this morning, which affect the program for this afternoon. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, folks. We're going to resume the agenda with agenda item 23.3, Capacity Building Framework, SC 77 Doc 23.3. Prior to breaking for lunch, the Secretariat introduced the document, and now I will open the floor to Standing Committee members for comments. Any comments from Standing Committee members? Morocco, you have the floor.
Merci, Madame la.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We would like to thank the Secretariat for this document. Capacity building is indeed vital to the successful implementation of the Convention. The aim here is to help parties and Secretariat partners to determine needs with respect to capacity building and to plan, prioritize, and coordinate such activities and see how effective they are. Capacity building has to be built on a needs evaluation process that involves a very careful assessment of the situation in each and every party so that their situations are taken into account. It is also important that the Secretariat recognize the need for financial partnerships, as funding can be a problem. Morocco had a very fruitful experience with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, particularly with respect to the work that was done with customs control agencies. the development and implementation of our National CITES Committee, as well as e-permit emissions. We would like to thank the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and would encourage countries in our region, and particularly African countries that might be running late, to take advantage of the help provided by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. We also think it's important that we take a careful and structured approach to capacity building and take into account national synergies that might be available with all players involved in biodiversity issues. And this would involve a coordination among national focal points and capacity building activities. We therefore would like to say that we support the Secretariat and their position in this document and encourage other parties to do so too. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Morocco. I give the floor to Georgia.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank the Secretariat for the efforts on the capacity building in general. And also on this agenda item, I would like to highlight the importance of consultations with the parties, which is mentioned in paragraph 5. We consider that consultations with regional consultations with the parties and all stakeholders will give more ideas for the to ensure the systemic approach for the capacity building, which is extremely important. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Georgia. Any other comments from members of the Standing Committee? Okay, I open the floor now to observer parties for comments on the document. I give the floor to the United States.
Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of the United States. We gladly note the documents in this agenda item from the Secretariat and from Sudan. We support the idea of the regional consultations, and we strongly support CITES capacity building. And our view is that every CITES party can improve its implementation of the convention and has gaps where capacity building is needed. We express gratitude to the donors, NGOs, and Secretariat staff who are undertaking numerous efforts around the world to boost capacity for CITES. Thank you.
Thank you, the United States. I give the floor to China.
Thanks a lot, Madam Chair. China thanks the Secretary for preparing the document. We have shared ideas, information, and experience related to the development of integrated capacity building framework. The contribution of China has been used to support activity on demand reduction, to combat illegal trade, enforcement in Asia, Africa, CITES, and livelihood, and UNIA scholarship. Since 2012, China has held 13 sessions of Hangzhou Seminar on Wildlife Conservation and CITES implementation, which has supported 659 participants from 62 countries in Africa, Asia, Central and South America, and the Caribbean. In addition, China Aid has also supported 640 colleagues from 55 countries to participate in CITES seminar held in Beijing. As an experience for enriching the capacity building framework, this year, China has worked with the Secretariat to plan and deliver 2 new capacity building activities. One is Talent Exchange Program for CITES scientific authorities. We call that TESA, which received 15 applications from 11 developing countries. After review and interview, 4 colleagues has been selected to participate in first 2 sessions of TESA programs. We are happy to take this opportunity to congratulate these colleagues. The other one is the initiative of identification manual of animal listed in CITES Appendix 1, which will be launched at noon tomorrow at the cafe. Some members of expert contact group of this animal committee will meet there. This is a new partnership between the Secretariat and China. We hope these initiatives could be better practice in developing the framework. We look forward to participating in the future discussion of a capacity building framework. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, China, for providing the committee with an update on those two really important initiatives. Any additional comments from observer parties? And I will open it up to observer organizations. Any comments on the document? Okay, seeing no additional comments, the committee will note document SC 77 23.3 and the comments that were made on the floor. Thank you. Next on the agenda is item 24, the Compliance Assistance Program, SC 77 Doc 24, and I will turn it over to the Secretariat.
Thank you, Chair. Document SC 7724, SC 77 Doc 24 has been prepared by the Secretariat. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. So at its 19th session, the Conference of the Parties adopted decisions 19.44 to 19.46 concerning the Compliance Assistance Program. 6 countries are current beneficiaries of the Compliance Assistance Program. These are Guinea, Nigeria, Solomon Islands, Lao People's Democratic Republic, Suriname, and Togo. The document presents the current situation with regard to the implementation of the Compliance Assistance Program in each of these 6 countries, as well as details about the activities conducted by the Secretariat. Since the previous report presented to the Standing Committee, the Secretariat has visited Guinea, Solomon Islands, Nigeria, and Suriname, and was able to assess progress made with the implementation of the program in these countries. Since the publication of the document, the agreement with Nigeria was signed last September, and the funds allocated to Nigeria and Suriname have been released. Guinea, Nigeria, and Togo have commenced the implementation of the activities foreseen in their respective work plans. Lao People's Democratic Republic is due to start its second phase of activities. Finally, during the mission to Solomon Islands conducted in September this year, an assessment of the country's compliance needs was undertaken, and the ensuing work plan has been finalized. Solomon Islands and Suriname are also planning to send participants to the UNIA Baeza Master's course taking place next year, supported by the Secretariat as part of the Compliance Assistance Program. The Standing Committee is invited to A. Acknowledge Guinea, Lao People's Democratic Republic, Nigeria, Solomon Islands, Suriname, and Togo for their commitment to participate in the Compliance Assistance Program in recognition of their own compliance needs and their engagement towards addressing those needs. And B, welcome the progress made so far in the implementation of the Compliance Assistance Program. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. I will start by opening the floor to Standing Committee members. Any comments on the document? I give the floor to New Zealand.
Thank you. We'd like to thank the Secretariat for this document. I'm taking the opportunity here to acknowledge and support the Secretariat is currently providing to the Solomon Islands through the Compliance Assistance Program. The Management Authority of the Solomon Islands is extremely grateful for the support. The support has involved a technical mission to assess needs and challenges and strengthen the country's compliance and enforcement work relating to international wildlife trade. It will also assist in finding a solution towards removing long-standing trade suspensions from birdwing butterflies, giant clams, and the monkey-tailed skink, and so enable legal and sustainable trade to resume in the future. As acknowledged on the CITES website, the Solomon Islands government has renewed its commitment to the implementation of the convention as a result of this work. This work was made possible through the generous funding from the United States, thank you. And the Management Authority is also extremely grateful for the support enabling an official to attend the CITES Masters program at the University of Andalusia. So thank you very much on behalf of the Oceania region.
Thank you, New Zealand. Any other comments from the committee members? Okay, I will open the floor up to observer parties. Oh. Indonesia, you have the floor.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving Indonesia the floor. Indonesia would like to commend the fellow countries, Guinea, Nigeria, Solomon Islands, Suriname, and Togo, and especially Laos as our member of ASEAN, for their commitment to participate in the Compliance Assistance Program. And Indonesia also welcomes the progress made so far in the implementation of the Compliance Assistance Program by the Secretariat. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Indonesia. Any comments from observer parties? The United States, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Speaking on behalf of the United States, we thank the Secretariat for establishing the Compliance Assistance Program, and we acknowledge the commitment of Guinea, Laos, PDR, Nigeria, Solomon Islands, Suriname, and Togo in their participation in this program. We're hopeful about this program to restore and establish compliance. It's also valuable when we help each other, party to party, and we saw that as an example when Côte d'Ivoire assisted the CITES Management Authority in Guinea, and we think that every CITES party could benefit from such a collaborative approach. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, United States. I'll give the floor to Nigeria.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor. As the new head of the CITES Management Authority for Nigeria, I would firstly like to thank the Chair and my fellow colleagues for the warm welcome extended so far. I can reassure you that Nigeria is committed to fully engaging and contributing towards this important meeting. Nigeria would like to thank CITES Secretariat and parties for their support regarding our inclusion in the Compliance Assistance Program. Nigeria is yet to receive this fund for the commencement of the project, but we have put the necessary structures in place to receive the fund and to comply, especially in the area of the NDF on pterocarpus and other necessary. We are also looking at the electronic system for our permitting, and we look forward to this fund coming in as soon as possible so that we can implement it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nigeria. Any other comments from observer parties? Any comments from observer organizations? Okay, seeing no additional comments, the Standing Committee agrees to the recommendations as outlined in Doc 24 and notes the comments on the floor. Thank you. Next up on the agenda is Doc 33.1, implementation of Article 13 and Resolution 14.3, Rev Cop 19 on CITES compliance procedures. I would first like to note that the potential compliance matter related to the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland will be considered in conjunction with document SC 77, Doc 33.8 on the application of Article 13 in the European Union on Tuesday morning, as the matters are similar. I give the floor to the Secretariat to introduce the document.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and warm congratulations again. I'm introducing document 33.1, which is the overarching document on compliance. It provides an update on two of the potential compliance matters identified at the 74th meeting of the Standing Committee, for which separate documents were not produced: the case of the United Kingdom and the case of Vietnam. As explained by you, given the nature of the potential compliance matter concerning the UK, this case will be discussed tomorrow, together with the case of the European Union. Therefore, I'm introducing the case of Vietnam, together with two emerging potential compliance matters regarding trade in live animals to India and trade in live birds from Suriname. Please let me highlight the word potential, as they are not yet compliance issues. We are only in the initial steps of the process described in Resolution 14.3. Paragraphs 37 to 43 of the document contain some preliminary considerations on the need to develop guidelines on harmonized interpretation of the scope and application of the recommendations to suspend trade, following the questions generated by the Secretariat's notification on trade suspension regarding the case of the compliance action plan related to illegal trade in Totoaba. Finally, Madam Chair, the Secretariat is recommending the development and adoption of a compliance action plan template. The Secretariat's attempt with these compliance matters is to bring to the attention of the committee concerns about potential non-compliance with the highest levels of accuracy and objectivity. You will note that the Secretariat also highlights what the party is doing well. The intention is to support parties to implement the Convention effectively and ensure that wildlife conservation goals agreed amongst yourselves are achieved. The approach is technical and each case is unique. Let me also remind the parties and the committee that a supportive and non-adversarial approach is taken towards compliance matters in CITES and due process is observed. The compliance questions in front of you and the reports that you will discuss are summaries of very complex situations with very long histories. The challenge for the committee is to decompress these reports, processes that are compressed for reasons of time and space and other resources constraints. The role of the committee is to determine what is trivial or ill-founded in these reports and what has merits to become a compliance matter. The Secretariat has shared the draft of these reports with the parties concerned for factual corrections before writing the recommendations. After publishing the documents, the Secretariat made efforts to again reach out to parties for any queries or advice needed. The Secretariat will share new information received with the Standing Committee in the introduction of all these documents, and parties will have an opportunity to update the committee as well. This will support the committee in agreeing on the final recommendations. Turning to the recommendations in this document, Madam Chair, the Secretariat invites the attention of the committee to paragraph 45 of the document. As explained in the first paragraphs concerning the UK will be discussed, these recommendations, tomorrow, together with the case concerning the EU. So the first block of recommendations concern timber trade from or to Vietnam, and the Standing Committee is invited to renew the mandates of the Secretariat to continue to keep close communication and strengthen the cooperation with Vietnam, and to seek an invitation to conduct a second technical assessment and verification mission to further investigate allegations brought to the attention of the Secretariat. Regarding trade in live animals to India and trade in live birds from Suriname, which are paragraph E and F of paragraph 45, the committee is invited to request the Secretariat to investigate these cases further and make recommendations to the Standing Committee, and to instruct the Secretariat to seek an invitation from India and Suriname to provide in-country assistance, conduct technical missions and technical and verification missions to understand how the CITES authorities ensure that this trade is in compliance with CITES. Regarding the guidance on the scope and application of recommendations to suspend trade, the committee is invited to instruct the Secretariat to prepare guidance on the scope and application of recommendations to suspend trade agreed by the Standing Committee. And finally, regarding the development and adoption of a compliance action plan template, the committee is invited to instruct the Secretariat to develop a standard template to assist the parties in the preparation of such compliance action plans. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. So I'm going to open the floor for comments on the document to the Standing Committee members, as well as any of the parties that are mentioned in the document. The United States, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I will speak for the North America region. The North America region commends the efforts of the Secretariat made with limited resources and acknowledging that the Standing Committee agenda is broad and imposing. Before our specific comments, we wanted to remind that Article 13 provides for the actions taken when there is a concern that a species is being affected adversely by trade, or that the provisions of the convention are not being effectively implemented. And we also remind parties that we have resolutions to provide guidance, but that the obligations reside in the text of the treaty. The North America region highly values CITES compliance procedures and their importance in ensuring the goals of the convention are well met, and we recognize the adoption of such compliance measures should be taken deliberately, soberly, and when essential. The specific obligations that are not being met should be clear and precise, as should the justification of the recommendations. Recommendations should be in the scope of the convention in order to ensure compliance measures are effective and appropriate. And we have some specific comments. In this regard, there are issues raised in the document that may not meet this bar. The North America region notes that the information in the document on Vietnam, India, and Suriname does not obviously identify a clear matter of non-compliance. As such, rather than the proposed recommendations in paragraph 45, D, E, and F, including the technical missions, we would suggest that the CITES Standing Committee take note of the report of the Secretariat regarding timber trade to and from Vietnam, regarding trade in live animals to India, and regarding trade in live birds from Suriname. Further, we recommend that the Standing Committee request the Secretariat to engage with the relevant parties as appropriate and encourage these countries to provide further information when asked. If the Secretariat identifies a specific issue of non-compliance with the obligations of CITES, they are requested to report as such to the Standing Committee. We have one final specific comment, thank you for bearing with me, regarding paragraph 45G. We thank the Secretariat for this recommendation and we agree guidance on the scope and the application of recommendations to suspend trade that are agreed by the Standing Committee would be useful. However, it's not clear that, it is clear that not all parties shall share the view, not all parties share the view of the Secretariat of the scope of these recommendations, and as such, it's premature to request guidance. So rather, we would suggest that the Standing Committee submit to the COP a draft decision directing the Standing Committee to discuss the issue and to propose guidance. Lastly, the North America region agrees with Recommendation H on developing a template for the Compliance Action Plan. Thank you very much for listening.
I have one question in the United States when you were referring to the recommendations in paragraph 45, D, E, and F. Your recommendation is to take note of the different types of trade for each country, and there was one other element to there that I did not catch.
Yes, and that's correct. To take note, of the report of the Secretariat regarding those issues with the specific countries, and then to recommend that the Standing Committee request the Secretariat to engage with those parties as appropriate and ask for more information as needed. And if there's a specific non-compliance issue, then that could be reported to the Standing Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, United States. I will give the floor now to India.
Thank you, Madam Chair. India would like to highlight the cultural ethos on which the conservation and protection of wildlife in India is based. India has always had a rich tradition of worshipping nature. The feeling of protection of nature and living beings are inherent in our culture and traditions. Our various scriptures explain the importance of water, air, land, and all ecosystem services provided by nature and give us the message of being compassionate towards living beings. We would like to assure the Standing Committee that India has a robust system of ensuring compliance of CITES provisions while permitting import of live animals. This involves various authorities of several ministries such as Ministry of Commerce, Ministry of Animal Husbandry, Fisheries and Dairying, and Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, and authorities such as Central Zoo Authority, Wildlife Crime Control Bureau, and the State Forest Departments. The no objection for import of live specimens is given by the CITES Management Authority of India as far as possible after verifying the source and purpose code through the export permit issued by the country of export. The ZZRRC in Gujarat has been recognized and registered by the Central Zoo Authority, which is a regulatory body under the Indian law. Further, the facility is maintaining very high standards of animal welfare, rescue, rehabilitation, and lifetime care. We would like to inform the CITES Committee that CITES Management Authority of India has already extended invitation to the CITES Secretariat to consider sending a team to visit the facility under reference. India would further reiterate its invitation to the CITES verification mission to visit the facility and assure to provide all in-country assistance. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, India. I will give the floor now to Belgium.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the case for Vietnam, we thank the Secretariat for the report and we agree that further work needs to be done. We do note that the Secretariat focused on an analysis of the trade of timber, even though the agreed mandate was to look into timber as well as other species. The Secretariat highlights this themselves in paragraph 25, where they state that further work is needed to make a final determination on the allegations related to Vietnam's possible engagement in trade in timber and other species that have been illegally harvested or traded, including timber that has been traded contrary to CITES provisions. We therefore suggest to change the recommendation in paragraph 45D So it refers to timber and other species in the two relevant parts of the recommendation. For the two potential cases regarding India and Suriname, we can agree to the suggested way forward as suggested by the United States of America. With regards to the general issues highlighted in this document, first of all, the development of guidance on the scope and application of a recommendation to suspend trade. If there's a strong feeling that there's a need to develop such guidance, we can support this. We do find it a bit strange that this is now suddenly being put into question. From our side, we've always understood such a trade suspension as a suspension of all trade going into and out of the country in question. With regards to the validity of permits that were issued prior to the entry into force of the suspension, we feel or we consider them as valid because they were issued prior to the entry into force of the suspension. We do note that the wording used to recommend a trade suspension can differ from case to case, and if there is a will for the development of guidance, we suggest it would also focus on standardizing the wording. With regards to the template for an action plan, we feel that this could be useful, but we note that every case is different, and therefore any template should be made in a way it can capture the specificities of each different case. Thank you.
Thank you, Belgium. I give the floor now to Brazil.
Gracias, señora presidenta.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On document 33.1, Brazil has no objections to the proposal made by the United States of America on Suriname and India. However, we wanted to draw attention to the fact that we feel there's been an increase in the tendency for illegal trafficking of the guacamayos azules has been increasing, and in these cases we have seen 29 specimens, which is an endemic species, and the government has carried out a mission to repatriate the animals, and of the 20, we were only able to return 5 since they had been taken away the day before our mission arrived. They'd been taken away from the possession of the government of Panama. This year, we have also received information that 3 of these Leah's macaws were intercepted at the international airport of Dhaka, and then we received information that they had died after being held in quarantine. And recently we received information that there had been a seizure of blue Leah macaws at a zoo in India. And the information we have received is that they were then removed from that zoo. So the data would seem to indicate that the illegal trade is taking place on this rare species, but which is endemic to our country. This is happening, and we wanted to draw this information to the attention of all members of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil, for providing that additional information. Any more comments from members of the Standing Committee? The United Kingdom.
Thank you, Chair. We can support the proposed way forward put forward by the North America region and EU for the potential compliance cases being discussed today. Regarding guidance on trade suspensions, we are unsure this is necessary as the Convention defines trade quite clearly as export, re-export, import and introduction from the sea. And so we'd agree with the Secretariat's understanding that the suspension case in question would have applied to all the commercial transactions to or from the state subject to compliance procedures. If the Standing Committee considers that trade suspensions should be limited to only certain aspects of trade, e.g. exports only, based on the non-compliance in question, then this can be specified in the wording of the Standing Committee recommendation. As such, we're not convinced that this requires the preparation of guidance and could be addressed by clear and precise recommendations going forward. But as the EU also noted, there is a variety of language used in the past for trade suspensions, and so we could see merit in using standardized wording, and there may be guidance needed around that, I suppose, if we are exploring guidance. Just so that it's clear to all parties what's covered by a particular recommendation to suspend trade. Thank you.
Thank you, the United Kingdom. Any more comments from the Standing Committee? I will open it up to observer parties. I give the floor to China.
Thank you, Madam Chair. China notes this document with some concerns on paragraph 45, letter H, about a standard compliance action measure template. First, national conditions and capacities of each contracting parties may vary significantly. Therefore, the required compliance measures will also vary. Imposing a one-size-fits-all template prevents countries from exploring and implementing more practical compliance measures which they see fit, thus frustrating capacity building. According to Article 14, paragraph 1 of each party has the clear right to make domestic measures as necessary to implement the convention. So China does not support the paragraph 45, letter H, on a standard compliance action plan. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Any other comments from observer parties? Vietnam, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, as this is the first time for Vietnam taking the floor, we would like to congratulate you on your nomination as the Chair and present our gratitude to the Secretariat for your hard work and Switzerland for your excellent host as usual. Madam Chair, Vietnam welcomes the effort made by Secretariat to the compliance procedure with the aim to ensure the fair and transparent manner in relation to the case of Vietnam and associated allegations. We hereby once again reaffirm the accuracy of information that provided before and during the technical mission in Vietnam in 2022. We were aware of the limited time allowance to the mission had for the technical visit, and we regret that information obtained through that were not sufficient for your study and final conclusion. In the meantime, Vietnam welcomes the recommendation made by Secretariat to renew the mandate and to conduct the second mission to Vietnam. We expect the next mission to obtain relevant information and insight to clear the unjustified allegation to Vietnam on possible engagement in trade contrary to CITES provision. we are willing to provide in-country assistance as needed. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Vietnam. Any additional observer parties? Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to colleagues who have intervened. So firstly, Canada evidently underscores and supports the views expressed by the United States on behalf of the North American region. To add to the comments made by the United States for the region, we recognize that both India and Vietnam have indicated welcoming missions from the Secretariat. The concern that Canada has at this moment is, in light of the intervention that the Secretary General made at the beginning of our meeting, and in general over the limited resources of the Secretariat, that we want to make sure we are taking decisions on the conduct of technical missions in light of a clear identification of a compliance issue. So the struggle Canada had in reviewing document 33.1 is, for example, in the issues raised for India, it was not apparent to us that a non-compliant trade had indeed occurred. And so then we ask ourselves about the proportionality of action to take, and that perhaps some written correspondence or other correspondence between the Secretariat and the parties identified, which I believe is the intent also of Resolution Comp 14.3, might be sufficient. So we would encourage, when missions are being proposed, to seek a little more information or details to the specific outcomes of those missions and the specific issues of non-compliance with the obligations of the Convention, in order to be able to make some judicious choices with the limited resources. We note the comment from Belgium regarding a consistent or a standardization approach to recommendations to suspend trade, and we would agree that that would be useful. We do think that there are some areas of discussion within the matters that were raised by the Secretariat, and so again, I would agree with the North American region that this could merit some discussion. And while not part of this document, in that same way, Canada might look forward to also creating some more consistency in the development of future recommendations and to assist parties in achieving compliance, as we are concerned through looking at the body of documents under this broad Agenda 33, that relationship with the obligations under the Convention might be getting lost in our recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Canada. Any other observer parties would like the floor? I now open it up to observer organizations and give the floor to World Parrot Trust.
Thank you, Chair. As this is the first time we're taking the floor, I'd like to thank the Secretariat and Standing Committee for their efforts in organising this meeting. The World Parrot Trust would like to express our concerns regarding the apparent uptick in illegal trade in Lear's macaws, as well as other rare macaws, as indicated by seizures in Suriname and Bangladesh, and recently also seizures of high-value Brazilian parrots in Germany. We also note with concern exports of Lear's macaws from Syria in 2018, 2019, and 2020, while there have been no reported legal imports into the country. We'd like to congratulate Brazil on their efforts to repatriate the Lear's macaws seized in Suriname and Bangladesh. All specimens of this species are vitally important for conservation. Lear's macaws were driven very close to extinction by capture and trade, while populations have recovered due to intensive conservation efforts, while populations remain in the hundreds. It's vital that trade in this species, as well as other rare parrots that are highly valued by collectors, is carefully controlled, and we urge CITES parties to be diligent in tracing birds to source to prevent trafficked birds from being effectively legalized into trade. Thank you.
Thank you, World Parrot Trust. I give the floor to Green Zoological Rescue and Rehabilitation Center.
Madam Chair, we congratulate you on your nomination as the chairperson for the 77th Standing Committee meeting of the CITES. This is our first time here, and we are honored and privileged to be here amongst all distinguished delegates. We would briefly like to provide a very short introduction of our organization. GZRRC is a non-profit organization that is a center for animal welfare, conservation, research, and education. It is duly recognized as a rescue and rehabilitation center by the Government of India under the Indian Wildlife Protection Act and rules. GZRRC was founded with the aims of implementing species conservation, both in situ and ex situ, mitigation of man-animal conflict, habitat restoration, empowering environmental protection agencies, and conservation education of local communities. Since our inception in 2019, we have provided home to several distressed captive animals from zoos and facilities within India and abroad at our facility in Jamnagar, Gujarat, India. We pride ourselves on having state-of-the-art housing and veterinarian infrastructure, accompanied with qualified, experienced, and able professionals to serve and improve the condition of the ill and infirmed animals we rescue. Due to the negative economic effect of COVID-19 pandemic, several zoos and animal facilities across the world were struggling to run operations and unable to maintain the upkeep and care of live animals. On the request of such organizations and their government bodies, we have been rescuing such captive animals in distress from facilities abroad and importing them to our center. We have also rescued animals from hunting lodges, rescue centers, and overcrowded facilities. As part of our conservation goals, we at GZRRC have initiated planning and execution of several conservation and breeding programs for species such as the Indian white-backed vultures, the Indian wolf, and the Indian wild ass, amongst others. Similarly, we have collaborated with international organizations that are part of breeding and conservation programs for endangered parrots. We seek to provide our international partners with all the assistance, expertise, and experience at our command to release rare species like the Spix's macaw back in their range habitat. Madam Chair, as a matter of our policy and compliance with national laws, all the imports are done in accordance with the provision of CITES as well as India's Wildlife Protection Act. Madam Chair, we would like to use this opportunity to thank all CITES authorities, national and international, for their continued guidance. As I end my address, I would like to conclude with the Sanskrit phrase, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which means the world is one family. With that in mind and heart, we look forward to working hand in hand with all members of this forum with the ultimate goal of animal welfare and conservation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Green Zoological Rescue and Rehabilitation Center. I'm going to quickly give the floor to the Secretariat to provide some more information about the recommendation H.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all the parties and observers that have provided comments. Very useful, very welcome, all of them. Regarding paragraph H, what we are referring to is really a very empty template to guide the parties that receive recommendations to develop compliance action plans to know what they are supposed to provide as a compliance action plan. But these are just the very generic fields that should contain any compliance action plan, including the activities, the milestones, the deadlines, the budget. We learn a lot from the experience with the Mexican case, and I think that the Secretariat had the feeling that this may benefit other parties. It's really a very generic template to standardize and to share a common understanding on what is requested by paragraph 29H of the annex to resolution 14.3 when the committee recommends a party to develop a compliance action plan. So we think that that may be a useful tool for the parties, and it is not intended to be prescriptive or going beyond what is provided in your national legal frameworks. And that may be also useful for the committee to assess if the recommendation has been implemented to the satisfaction of the committee. So it's just a recommendation to have a standard tool and share a common understanding. You can have a look at the existing plan for Mexico, just on the fields, the very generic fields that all compliance action plans should contain. But we are in your hands, and we are happy to follow your instructions on this item. Since I have the floor, I would like to just make two quick comments. We take your comments on the issues of capacity, on the issue of being specific on which obligations under the treaty are concerned by these cases, and the importance of following due process. Probably we were not as good as we wanted to be, explain the urgency and why now these two cases. But with the interventions from different delegates here, I think that you understood that we are working on referring to an Appendix 1 species that is highly endangered, that we are in permanent contact with parties that are concerned by this trade, and that some of them are welcoming the missions. So it's not that we are bringing the case from zero to the committee. There is background, but for reasons of space and probably lack of explanation in our side, you may not have all the elements that you were expecting to make your decisions. So, but these cases are fully substantiated, and as you can imagine, the Secretary is receiving information every day from all of you, including the observers, on what's going on, and the needs in the world are huge. And after the pandemic, they seem to be increasing. So we are just identifying the top cases that we think require your attention. But again, this is for your consideration, and we are more than happy to follow your instructions on the way forward. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you guys for your comments on this document, and I propose we take the recommendations one by one. And so I'm going to start with recommendation D regarding timber trade from or to Vietnam. I heard two separate proposals, one from the United States to note the report regarding the timber trade from Vietnam. And the second proposal was from Belgium, and their proposal was to incorporate and other species into the recommendation D following where timber is mentioned. And so I'm looking to the Standing Committee to see what their thoughts are on those two proposals. Indonesia, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just wanted to reconfirm how is the status of the other recommendations. For example, on 45 ABC on UK, will it be decided and discussed now, or maybe a contact group will be established? Okay.
Yeah, the recommendations under paragraph 45 for A through C will be taken up tomorrow, along with the document for the European Union for Article 13 application in the European Union, since both of those cases are very similar. So currently, we're just looking at the recommendations in paragraph 45, D through H.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Sophie.
So I don't see any comments or about the U.S. proposal for Vietnam. And so any comments on the Belgian proposal for the Vietnam recommendation? D, about expanding the recommendation to include other species? Getting some head nods. Yeah? Some head nods. Okay, I'm going to take that as agreeing, and so we will amend. The committee agrees to amend the recommendation D in paragraph 45 to read, renew the mandate of the Secretariat to continue to keep close communication and strengthen the cooperation with Vietnam to understand how the CITES authorities ensure that timber and other species are imported and re-exported in full compliance with CITES. The Secretariat shall seek an invitation from Vietnam to provide in-country assistance, conduct a second technical mission and a verification mission to further investigate allegations related to Vietnam's possible engagement in trade in timber and other species that have been illegally harvested or traded, and the rest of the paragraph will resume as written in the document. So the next recommendation is recommendation E regarding trade in live animals to India. There seemed to be some support on the floor for the proposal by the United States to note the Secretariat's report regarding trade in live animals to India. And regarding, and request the Secretariat to engage with India as appropriate to identify any specific compliance issues and report back to the Standing Committee. Is there support for that proposal? Seeing some head nods also. No objections, so the committee agrees to the recommendation as the proposal provided by the United States. The next recommendation we're going to take up is regarding trade in live birds from Suriname, recommendation F. Again, we had the proposal from the United States to take note of the Secretariat's report regarding trade in live birds from Suriname and request the Standing Committee to request the Secretariat to engage with Suriname as appropriate to identify any specific compliance issues and to report back to the Standing Committee. Is the committee agreed to that recommendation? Head nods. Okay, the committee agrees. And then we have recommendation G regarding guidance on the scope and application of recommendations to suspend trade. Okay, so in regards to recommendation G, we had a proposal from the United States, as well as I heard some interest in having standardized language in how recommendations to suspend trade are conveyed to the parties. And so I think I'm going to propose to the committee as a way forward is to request for the Standing Committee to request the Secretariat to propose a draft decision to COP, tasking the Secretariat to look at or develop guidance.
With the support of the Secretary. So instruct the
Okay. For recommendation G, it will be, I am proposing for the Standing Committee to instruct the Secretariat to prepare a draft decision to COP that directs the Standing Committee to generate guidance in collaboration with the Standing Committee, Secretariat on recommendations to suspend trade, as well as look at and develop common nomenclature and language to be used during when recommendations to suspend trade are provided from the Standing Committee. How is the committee feeling about that proposal that wraps in both elements? Okay, some head nods, good. So,
we put it in it's in the
okay. So we agree on that way forward for recommendation G. And then for recommendation H, we had some support for this recommendation. And then we also had a comment from China. And so for the Standing Committee, are we supportive of this recommendation, to agree to this recommendation on standardizing a template for the Compliance Action Plan? Head nods, great. So we agree to recommendation H. Thank you. Canada, you have requested the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and my apologies. I did want you to conclude your business with the Standing Committee before I just made a final intervention in response to the Secretariat's comments. I do appreciate that the Secretariat takes this role of theirs in terms of identifying compliance matters very seriously and soberly, and that they are bringing to the committee the issues that they consider to be the most important. I just wanted to note that from that intervention, I understood that there was perhaps additional contextual or other information that resulted in the conclusions that are brought on this paper that are perhaps not well identified. To my understanding, what the Standing Committee has in order to be able to take their decisions, it's what's in these papers. And so I would highly encourage the Secretariat perhaps to provide a bit more of that substance in some form to help future deliberations on issues related to compliance. And again, I will continue to underscore that in particular, what is the most helpful is to have a clear indication as Resolution 14.3 asks for the obligations under the Convention that are not being implemented or that there is concerns that they are not being implemented. Thank you.
Thank you, Canada. The committee will note your comment. The next agenda item is 3311, application of Article 13 in Nigeria, SC 77 Doc 33.11. And I give the floor to the Secretariat.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm introducing document 3311, application of Article 13 in Nigeria. And welcome to the new Management Authority. Congratulations. At SC 70, Standing Committee 74th and Standing Committee 75th, the Standing Committee reviewed the effective implementation of CITES in Nigeria in accordance with the provisions of Article 13 of the Convention. At SC 17th, the Standing Committee adopted a set of recommendations that included inter alia recommendation to suspend trade in specimens of Pterocarpus erinaceus and recommendations to Nigeria to take strong enforcement actions against organized criminal networks involved in the illegal trade in pangolins and ivory, among other species. At Standing Committee 75th, the committee reviewed the progress made by Nigeria on the implementation of those recommendations and agreed a new set of recommendations contained in the summary record of the SC 75. The committee inter alia requested Nigeria to report on progress with the implementation of the committee's recommendations in time for the present meeting. On 14 August 2023, Nigeria sent its illegal trade report from January 2019 to June 2023. Annex 2 of the present document contains a table with the ivory seizures reported. Nigeria also submitted its report on progress with implementation of its NIAP, available as Annex 6 to document SC 77.34. Besides the information contained in this report, Nigeria was not able to submit a progress report on the implementation of the Standing Committee recommendations under Article 13 within the deadline for consideration at the present meeting as a result of general elections in Nigeria in February 2023 and a subsequent change in government. The Secretariat, however, has assessed Nigeria's situation and shared its findings in the present document. In sum, the Secretariat acknowledged Nigeria's progress with the implementation of some of the Standing Committee recommendations, in particular those related to the making of the non-determined finding for Pterocarpus erinaceus and certain legislation and law enforcement-related recommendations. The Secretariat welcomes Nigeria's responsiveness and looks forward to further support the new Management Authority with the implementation of the CAP, the Compliance Assistance Program, to assist in the successful achievement of the Standing Committee's recommendations. Madam Chair, the Secretariat proposed that the Standing Committee revise and update its recommendations adopted at the last meeting of the Standing Committee, meeting 75th, as suggested in paragraph 19 of the present document. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. I will give the floor to Nigeria.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me the floor again. Nigeria also want to thank the Secretariat for the preparation of document 33.11. As noted by the Secretariat, Nigeria has been working hard to ensure compliance with the various recommendations that were first adopted at SC 70 and updated at SC 75. We have welcomed the visits and communications by the Secretariat and will remain open to suggestions for continuing to enhance our compliance measures. Regarding legislation and law enforcement, Nigeria is pleased to report some progress with recommendations relating to legislation. Nigeria has developed a new Endangered Species Conservation and Protection Bill, which passed a first reading in Nigeria's House of Representatives in early 2023. The bill, if adopted, will bring Nigeria's legislation in line with requirements under CITES and other conventions on organized crime and corruption to strengthen Nigeria's response to wildlife crime. However, as the bill did not pass through before the last general elections held on February 2023, it has now lapsed and must be reintroduced in the federal legislature for legislative action and enactment. Nigeria is committed to strengthen its legislation in line with recommendations made under Article 13, and this new bill will enable us to do this. As such, we will continue to work closely with relevant stakeholders to reintroduce the bill to the current Assembly. We will report progress to the Standing Committee at its 78th meeting. Regarding the issuance of permits and information system, Nigeria is waiting for the receipt of funds for the CITES CAP program, initiating the process of transiting from manual issuance of permits to an electronic e-permitting system to eradicate practices such as permit fraud, document abuse, delay, corruption practices, and post-export issuance of permits, and proper monitoring of documents that are issued and upon inspection at border crossings. Handling and disposal of seized stockpiles of CITES-listed species. In October this year, we are pleased to report to CITES Standing Committee that Nigeria disposed a total of 3.9 tons of pangolin scales and 110 kilograms of other seized wildlife specimens through incineration under controlled burning. For the ivory stockpile disposal, crushing method has been concluded to be used for the disposal, which is coming up very soon. Update on the implementation of national strategy on wildlife and forest crime in Nigeria. Nigeria has started the implementation of the national strategy based on the thematic areas, although a lot needs to be done. We want to appreciate the German government for funding the strategy, as well as thank the UNODC for coordinating the implementation for Nigeria. On enhancing the institutional capabilities, the West Africa Strategy on Combating Wildlife Crime through Bomb-Free USA supported Nigeria in establishing the Wildlife Law Enforcement Task Force and National Combating Wildlife Crime Steering Committee, which were launched on the 8th of March 2023. This task force is currently going through a series of in-depth trainings for which we would like to extend our sincere thanks to the USAID WABI-led project and the INL Enhancing Wildlife Law Enforcement Capacity in West Africa project. Regarding strengthening the legal framework, the legislative review for some states has been completed and its recommendations are now embodied in the Endangered Species Conservation and Protection Bill, which now needs to be reintroduced and enacted soon. Finally, Chair, I would like to once again reiterate Nigeria's sincere commitment towards CITES compliance, while also acknowledging the scale of the task. We would, in particular, welcome enhanced cooperation with consumer countries to ensure that there are efforts being taken at all stages of the enforcement chain, and look forward to discussions with countries and partners regarding linkages with our Wildlife Law Enforcement Task Force. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those updates, Nigeria. I will now open the floor to standing committee members for comments on the document. Opening the floor to observer parties. The United States, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We appreciate the Secretariat's hard work in putting together this document, as well as the summary of recent activities and commitments that we've just heard from the delegation from Nigeria. With regard to the recommendations in the document, the United States supports the recommendation to suspend commercial trade in specimens of Pterocarpus erinaceus from Nigeria. With regard to the other recommendations in the document, while we support their intent, we think that several of them should be rephrased to be clear that they are recommendations for ways of approaching the issue rather than specific legal instructions to comply with the provisions of the convention. So, for example, that may include replacing shall with should, where appropriate, to identify recommendations rather than legal obligations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The United States. Any other comments from observer parties? Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Canada supports the position outlined by the United States. Further, Canada can support the revised recommendations proposed by the Secretariat regarding the Article 13 compliance process for Nigeria, with the exception of recommendations B and C regarding parties that import Pterocarpus erinaceus from Nigeria. We note that these two recommendations were directed to importers of that species from Nigeria and that they predate the expedited Article 13 process for all range states. We think it may be more appropriate to move those recommendations to the all range state process. Canada proposes that paragraph 19, subparagraphs B and C of the Nigeria recommendations be deleted from the recommendations in document 3311 and included as recommendations in paragraph 67 of document 33.3.2.3 and amended by removing the words "from Nigeria" in subparagraph B so as to apply to all Pterocarpus erinaceus range states currently included in the expedited application of an Article 13 compliance procedure. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Canada. I am going to ask you to just restate where you are recommending that recommendation B and C be placed in document 33.3.2.3.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we recommend that the recommendations from 33.11 be placed in paragraph 67 of document 33.1.3.2.3. Thank you.
And that Nigeria is taken out of those recommendations and it will be applied to all range states. Is that correct?
Thank you, Chair. That's correct. The words "from Nigeria" in subparagraph B would be deleted. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Canada. Any more comments on the document from observer parties? I give the floor to Benin.
Okay. Merci.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As this is the first time Benin has taken the floor, I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate you on assuming these chairing responsibilities and wish you every success. We welcome the document and recommendations made, but we would like to acknowledge the support given to countries by some organizations, such as those that work for the protection of elephants. Support that allowed Benin to submit its first report this year. We had been unable to do so up until now, whereas now we're able to provide information on stocks and on illegal trade. And with that information, have been able to produce a report. We would like to acknowledge the role of those organizations that help states to fulfill their convention-related obligations. Thank you.
Thank you, Benin. I give the floor to China.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As one of the major importing countries of endangered timber species, China continually takes much stricter management measures than the requirements of CITES Convention to strengthen the control of CITES lethal tree species importation and promote the protection and the sustainable utilization of timber resources. China has been actively fulfilling its obligations on the CITES, strictly implementing the provision of the Convention, supervision imports and civilly combat illegal trade. So we have always stressed that the fight against illegal trade requires the cooperation of exporting, transit, and importing countries to strengthen the exchange of information and to carry out crackdown along the supply chain. In particular, efforts should be made to improve the supervision level and law enforcement capacity of exporting countries, so as to avoid occurrence of illegal timber trade from the source. China is ready to work with relevant parties together to combat the illegal trade in endangered timber. Since on the current limited resources of funding for CITES, China suggests to delete the second part of paragraph 19C from and encouragements those to the end of this paragraph C. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, China. Okay, I heard a lot of comments, and so if I'm going to do a quick summary of some of the proposals that are on the table, and I'm turning to the Standing Committee to see what your thoughts are. So the first one is the U.S. proposal to change the language in the recommendations where shall occurs, to change it to should. There is support for that. So there is two proposals regarding recommendations B and C. The first proposal is from Canada, who would like both of those recommendations removed and inserted into the suite of documents that we will take up next. And then the second proposal, and please flag if I'm incorrect in relaying the proposal from China, which would be to, in recommendation C, to end that recommendation at sustainability, and removing the remainder, encouraging those parties to consider inviting the Secretariat, the remainder of that paragraph, removing that. Thank you, China. Okay, so the committee, we have those two proposals regarding recommendation B and C. And so we can take the Canada proposal first. Do we have support for removing those recommendations? Oh, I have Switzerland.
Thank you, Chair. Concerning that proposal, I'm not fundamentally against that. I just don't understand why only B and C and A, which is also in relation to pterocarpus, would then remain in the document. in relation to Nigeria. Just don't understand why not all recommendations are then transferred to the other. So there must be a rationale, maybe.
Thank you, Switzerland. I'm going to give the floor to the Secretariat.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair and Switzerland. Excellent point. And I didn't mention that we align. You will see the original recommendation of Nigeria was only referring to making an NDF. Now we added the same recommendation that exists for the other 15 countries, which is to do an NDF and an LAF. Since Nigeria was the first one, and if you remember, we recommended in that document in Sochi to move to a regional approach. They are under Article 13, so it's the same recommendation in two parts, but basically it's just to avoid that we forget that they have the recommendation under Article 13 since 2018, October, I think. But it's basically the same recommendation in two documents. That's why we maintain A, if you agree, but otherwise it's just one recommendation. You decide on the place where you want to see the recommendation. So far it's there because it's part of it was the main conclusion of the mission that we conducted at the time, the trade Enterocarpus erinaceus. But again, we are in your hands if you have a preference to place all the recommendations in document on Enterocarpus. The effect is the same. Only the difference is that they were suspended since 2018, which is a different timeline than the other countries that started the process last year. By the way, we appreciate also the recommendations on paragraph B and C to be moved to paragraph 67 of document on Enterocarpus erinaceus, which I think give more consistency to the recommendations that are in that document. Thank you, and I hope that responds to your query. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. And so I put that proposal back up from Canada to remove recommendations in paragraph B and C to the Standing Committee. Okay, we have some agreement. So we will remove those paragraphs. And does the committee agree to the rest of the recommendations with the edits by the United States to change the language from shall to should? And I would ask China, when we take up the document on Enterocarpus throughout the range states, to repropose that edit, if that is amenable. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Just flagging for the committee from our conversation this morning that we agree not to discuss document 33.6 at this point, and that we will save it for the end of the day today. And so we will be moving to document 33.2, expedited application of Article 13 for West African rosewood, Enterocarpus erinaceus for all range states. This agenda item is comprised of 3 documents. I will have all 3 documents introduced before opening the floor for discussions, and in the following order. We'll start with document 33.2.3, Rev 1, the report of the Secretariat. That will be followed by document 33.2.1, the report by Senegal, and finally, document 33.2.2, the report by Sierra Leone on the updated NDF and LAF. And so first I give the floor to the Secretariat.
Thank you, Chair. The Secretariat refers to document SC77 Doc 33.2.3, entitled Expedited Application of Article 13 for West African Rosewood, Enterocarpus erinaceus for all range states. The Secretariat last reported on this matter at the Standing Committee at its 75th meeting through document SC75, Doc 7.2.1, Rev 1. Since SC75, the Secretariat focused on the review of the implementation by ranch states of the recommendations set by the Standing Committee under the expedited application of Article 13, but also under the review of significant trade, RST, as related to Pterocarpus erinaceus. The Standing Committee might recall that all 16 ranch states of Pterocarpus erinaceus are concerned by the application of Article 13 of the Article 13 process. 8 countries have established voluntarily zero export quota, and 8 countries have submitted to a recommendation to suspend trade. 7 under this expedited application of Article 13, and Nigeria that is subject to its own Article 13 process as we just discussed. There are 2 conditions to withdraw the recommendation to suspend trade for these 8 countries, which also apply to countries that established voluntary zero export quotas, should they wish to resume international trade. These conditions are contained in paragraph 10 of notification to the parties number 2022/045. A. The party makes a non-determined finding, NDF, to the satisfaction of the Secretariat and the Chair of the Plans Committee, having regard to Resolution 16.7 Rev COP 17 on non-determined findings, and based on the outcomes of the RST process for this species. And B. The party makes a legal acquisition finding, LAF, to the satisfaction of the Secretariat and the Chair of the Standing Committee, having regard to Resolution 18.7, Rev COP 19 on legal acquisition findings. The present document provides an update on the implementation of the Standing Committee's recommendations under these 2 processes, the expedited application of Article 13 and the RST. Section 1 of the document refers to countries facing recommendations under both the Article 13 and RST processes. Section 2 refers to countries facing recommendations under the sole RST process. And Section 3 refers to the organization of a workshop on NDFs and LAFs for Pterocarpus erinaceus ranch states, thus implementing an integrated regional approach for all ranch states. The same sections are reflected in the recommendations section, and recommendations are organized country by country. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. I now give the floor to Senegal to introduce their document. Document 33.2.1.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So on this document that we have presented, we would like to recall that Senegal participated actively in the listing of Pterocarpus erinaceus in appendices 2 and 3. And in terms of the trade in the species, we would like to inform them of the regional challenges faced with the implementation, as well as the management of the stocks on a scientific basis. The prosecution of illegal harvesting and trans-frontier movements of specimens. At the presentation to the Standing Committee, we stated that it's a regional problem and it could lead to extinction. So a regional strategy is essential to protect the species. So in the face of awareness raising on a regional basis of illegal trade of Pterocarpus erinaceus, we drew the issue to the attention of the Standing Committee at the meeting in Lyon, in France, the 74th session of the SC, where we asked states to discuss the trade from the region and the trade since March 2022. We are still working on the challenges of implementation of the suspension and the efforts by states to strengthen capacities, a regional approach of the management of the legal issues and sustainability is essential. It would be premature to lift the trade suspension for a specific country at the current time. In addition, the management of stocks before and after the application, the expedited application of the Article 13 presents potential risks for the compliance with the CITES Convention. And information has been provided by range states, but the specimens must not perpetuate the unsustainable illegal trade and should be coordinated under the expedited application of Article 13. When we have to look at the additional stocks, so this is something that must be followed closely, and we have to consider the non-detrimental trade, and additional information is necessary. We are happy to hear there's a recommendation of a meeting to bring together range states in the document 33.2, page 10, and we are willing to participate in this workshop. We have participated in an intersessional working group for the issue, and the recommendations of the Secretariat will, we believe, will mean that the working group will no longer be necessary, and we hope we will find an integrated solution which will be a full protection for the species, and that the recommendations, the following extra recommendation be accepted. The Standing Committee recommends, aside from the previously approved exports from the pre-convention stockpile from Guinea, notification to the parties number 2022-023, legal trade in Pterocarpus erinaceus will not resume until after results and recommendations from the regional workshop have been reviewed by the standing and plants committees addressed by the range states to the satisfaction of the committees. So we'd like to highlight the importance of this species once more. And this is at risk of extinction, and it's essential for food, and protection of the species is essential on a sub-regional levels. Thank you.
Thank you, Senegal. I next give the floor to Sierra Leone.
As Sierra Leone is taking the floor for the first time, we would like to congratulate the chair and thank her for the management of this meeting, and to thank the government of Switzerland and the Secretariat for the organization of the meeting and your warm hospitality and the opportunity to highlight our country's dedication to CITES principles globally. My delegation thanks Senegal for the report just read. We share the concern about the sustainable exploitation and trade of flora and fauna. Sierra Leone received notification number 2022-45 in June 2022 on the outcomes of expedited application of Article 8 for West African rosewood pterocarpus for all range states. It is this reason why Sierra Leone submitted a voluntary zero quota. Since then, we are way advanced in conducting NDF and working on the LAF. In continuation with compliance to the notification, Sierra Leone has submitted a scientifically based NDF and LAF for the attention and satisfaction of the Secretariat Standing Committee. Sierra Leone takes sustainable forest management very seriously, and we see these resources as intergenerational assets that belong to present and future generations. We have invested significant resources into scientific analysis and legal management of these natural resources. We do not think, however, that we need an unlimited period of transition for us to prudently manage our forest resources. These resources are national patrimony, providing livelihood for hundreds of thousands of our citizens, and are located in an entirely non-conflict areas. These areas are far away from contested zones and are under the firm control of our government. We support the recommendation for West African Regional Capacity Workshop, which Sierra Leone is prepared to host. And we strongly appeal that our pre-harvested timber, which as we speak is rotting in the rainforest and can therefore not be subjected to sustainability tests, be allowed to ship. We hope the Secretariat and the Standing Committee and all parties understand our position, especially when we have complied with all conditions set forth in the notification. Each country should be treated on a case-by-case basis. Sierra Leone has made a significant leap in management of our natural resources and should not be penalized for doing so. Thank you.
Thank you, Sierra Leone. I'm just going to take a break. The committee can take a break for 2 minutes. I'm going to do a bio break. I'll be back. Okay, thank you, committee. We're going to resume. If folks can take their seats, we're going to resume. Okay, thank you, committee. We will resume with turning the floor back to Sierra Leone so they can introduce their document. Sierra Leone, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Once again, I'd like to thank you and the government of Switzerland and the Secretariat for organizing this meeting. The forest resources of Sierra Leone are key for domestic use and international trade, and we're making critical investments for current and future sustainable use of our resources, consistent with international best practices and biodiversity conservation rules. As a producer and range state, international trade of timber species, especially pterocarpus from Sierra Leone, is critical for our economic development, badly needed growth in rural infrastructure, and investment in resource management. We understand our responsibility for stewardship of our resources and the obligation to present robust management plans and approaches for complying with international trade standards. The government of Sierra Leone, through the Ministry of the Environment and Climate Change, is making key investments in compliance and has taken proactive steps to address species-specific issues of CITES-listed species. Our priority has been to complete non-detriment findings and legal acquisition findings for addressing compliance and lifting zero export quota for Pterocarpus erinaceus. What have we done so far? Sierra Leone Scientific Authority has completed a national, district, and chiefdom level survey and inventory of Pterocarpus to complete the NDF compliance process. The results are verifiable and based on sound science. They set forth the data for sustainable harvest of the species going forward. The Sierra Leone Management Authority has taken very proactive steps to engage international experts, such as Forest Source LLC, to work with the ministry to institute a comprehensive digital traceability and inventory management system to address compliance with our national laws and international trade of CITES-listed species. The key mandate from the ministry is to increase investment in sustainable forest management and legal acquisition compliance process through digital traceability tools and data management systems. All companies must comply with the law, and all logs harvested are accounted for from point of origin to export destination. We can demonstrate the investments in the NDF and LAF process through our custom geoportal designed specifically to capacitate the management and scientific authorities to manage forest resources. Of course, the system was designed to complete the NDF and LAF traceability for Pterocarpus. but will be customized for all commercial tree species through a national forest inventory for the establishment of sustainable harvest quota that would ensure every tradable timber species is conserved in perpetuity. Based on Sierra Leone's forest law of minimum exploitable diameter of 30 centimeters, every pterocarpus tree that is greater than 30 centimeters is scanned and given a unique ID and is georeferenced in the geoportal. We can sort for volume per hectare, volume per tree, height, and sort for standing trees by region, concession, down to the specific tree. We can also track all logs harvested back to the stump. We can scan for length, volume, and diameter of every log. All data is uploaded to the custom geoportal that is accessible and can be monitored remotely, thereby preventing any illegal harvest. This is critical for our LAF compliance and addressing international regulatory frameworks such as the EUDR and US Lacey Act. We look forward to demonstrating the system to the Standing Committee and Plans Committee. We hope our investments will be a model across range states and globally for moving into the future for sustainable forest management and sustainable trade of pterocarpus species. Sierra Leone wishes to raise the standards for legal accountability and traceability for the pterocarpus trade. Based on our investment in a comprehensive traceability system and engagement with Forest Source, we have submitted an updated NDF and LAF procedures for review by the Standing Committee and Plans Committee for the lifting of the zero export quota, which was self-imposed by Sierra Leone in 2022 to ensure effective compliance with international standards. The NDF data for pterocarpus was verified through the international experts and has formed the basis for establishing a national annual harvestable quota of 152,649 cubic meters. From the national quota, we will take a precautionary principle approach and only allocate 50% of our export quota, which will be 75,000 cubic meters per year for the species, for the first 2 years with incremental monitoring based on updates to our NDF. Based on our commitment to sustainable management, legal acquisition, and traceability, we request that the zero export quota be lifted. We request that the Standing Committee consider the fact that Sierra Leone timber companies have pre-zero quota of legally harvested stocks of pterocarpus logs, which are privately owned and which we consider compliant to export under our established export quota and consistent with existing legislations. We propose to allocate the annual export quota of 75,000 cubic meters to the pre-zero export harvested stocks of pterocarpus for 2 years and not issue licenses to harvest any pterocarpus tree until this allocation and export is completed. We will guarantee that all logs that are pre-zero export legally harvest stocks will be put through our LAF procedures. The logs will be tallied, numbered, and identified in our traceable system. Giving time before allocating export quotas based on harvesting standing trees will increase the conservation and growth of the current standing harvestable volume of pterocarpus in areas allocated for harvest licenses under the recent NDF. This will increase our time to address all national forest management issues, including updating forest legislation and policies to reflect our investment in our traceability and forest management systems. The government expresses its unflinching commitment through its National Protected Area Network to conserve vast areas of pterocarpus woodland in our Outamba-Kilmini National Park, which ensures the perpetual preservation of the species in Sierra Leone. As a nation, we will very much appreciate if the Standing Committee agrees with the recommendation of the Secretariat to initiate an intersessional consultation process with the Plans Committee through its chair to review the NDF submitted by Sierra Leone. Finally, we invite representatives from the Secretariat, the Standing Committee and Plans Committee, and representatives from other range states to come to Sierra Leone and witness our investments and commitments to CITES compliance and sustainable forest management. Thank you.
Thank you, Sierra Leone. I will now open the floor for comments for members of the Standing Committee. I give the floor to Belgium.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With regards to the documents, with recommendations made by the CITES Secretariat, we agree that no further recommendations are required for Côte d'Ivoire, Guinea, Niger, and Senegal. With those countries that are also under the Plans Committee review of significant trade processes, being Benin, Burkina Faso, Ghana, and Sierra Leone, we note that Part A of the Plans Committee recommendations have been started, but Plans Committee recommendations B to D, as outlined in document 33.2.3, Wave 1 Annex, are still outstanding. For Benin, we support the recommendation to bring their new document related to their non-detriment finding to the non-detriment finding workshop in Nairobi as a case study. For Sierra Leone, we agree with the Secretariat's recommendations in the document to have their non-detriment finding document reviewed through an intersessional process by the Plans Committee, as this is the most appropriate committee to review such document. With regards to the document and the explanation provided by Senegal, Senegal proposed a revised recommendation, and I would like to ask them to have it repeated. I think we more or less captured it and can agree to it, but it would be good to have it read out again to make sure we got all aspects of it. And for Sierra Leone, we thank them for the update given just now, and we congratulate them for their work on developing a robust NDF and LAF system. And if I understood it correctly, Sierra Leone also agrees to the Secretariat's recommendations, so then we would agree to that as well and have no further comments on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Belgium. I give the floor to the United States.
Thank you, Chair. I will be speaking on behalf of the North America region on two documents. On 33.2.2 on the report from Sierra Leone, we congratulate Sierra Leone on developing revised draft non-detriment findings and legal acquisition findings for Pterocarpus erinaceus. This work reflects significant progress. We have noted that as NDFs are being produced for this species, they differ significantly. For example, the scientific parameters used to arrive at exploitable harvest and export quotas, and this includes minimum value DBH, which is among the most important information for developing those quotas. We recommend a more holistic approach to better inform both of those findings. The planned regional workshop would provide the opportunity for an in-depth discussion of the key parameters for this species for well-supported findings. And so, consistent with what Senegal has suggested, we recommend that further review of NDFs and LAFs await the results of the workshop before other actions are taken, and so that recommendations can be asked for input by the Standing Committee and the Plants Committee. As it relates to the export of wood harvested prior to Article 13 suspension, we note that the volume of wood and the timing of harvest have not been provided, and this would be needed to make an informed decision on that wood. Thank you on that document. We would also, with the chair's permission, like to comment on document 33.2.3 from the Secretariat.
The United States, will you, do you have edits to the recommendations?
We do have minor edits. We overall agree with the recommendations, but have some technical corrections.
Yep, so I'm going to ask you to save your recommendations, and I will go through the recommendations country by country, and I can take those edits at that time.
Thank you.
Do we have any more comments on the suite of documents from the committee? From observer parties? Opening the floor to observer parties. Cameroon?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me the floor. This is the first time we have taken the floor at this standing committee. Let me take this opportunity to wish Rosemary Nyam rapid recovery, and we welcome your presence here as chair and wish you every success. We would also like to take this opportunity to congratulate the CITES Secretariat on the excellent preparatory work done for this standing committee meeting. Now, with respect to the item at hand, we feel that it is appropriate to mention Cameroon's interest in Pterocarpus ceranaceus, and we have taken a number of management measures, particularly with respect to its production in a quota-regulated system, this under ministerial supervision. With respect to the implementation of Standing Committee resolutions and notification to parties 2022-045 of June 2022, the Minister asked the management authority to take appropriate measures to ensure the protection of Pterocarpus ceranaceus. We have therefore launched 2 activities, and their results have been considered at a number of different meetings involving a number of different players, taking into account developments in the field as well as the literature. We've been looking, for instance, at the situation on the ground, the whole question of trade in Cameroon, our cartography, and UAK. In the light of what is currently underway and planned, we intend to have official forest management units, this in order to ensure that we can act in ways that are in keeping with existing regulations. The figures that were published in 33.2.3 are it is something we would like to mention, in that we feel that those figures should take account the current process underway in our country. and we hope to bring together a whole set of rules and regulations regarding inventories, exploitation systems, as well as the management plans that we have. Our plan of action has been transferred to the Secretariat so that our activities with respect to the species can be taken into account. And we feel that what we have done could very well be of use to all of those involved, all those in the who are also range states. We welcome the support we've been given with respect to species management, and we hope that we do everything in order to take full advantage of expertise acquired. We would welcome any work that might be planned with neighboring states, including Nigeria, with respect to follow up on illegal trade in this species. I would like to come back to the recommendation made by Senegal. We would stress that the Secretariat recommendations with respect to Cameroon, which have already been taken on board by our authorities, be maintained. They are currently being implemented, and we have a public plan of action with respect to our management measures. We certainly acknowledge what Senegal is doing and congratulate them on their measures, but we do feel that this really is something of a unilateral initiative that has not been involved in any consultation with other range states in the region, and we do feel that this means that the initiative might not take into account the situation obtaining in individual countries and, for instance, the progress being made by Cameroon in this respect. Therefore, given that situation and given the fact that Senegal's initiative is really only a germ of an initiative just at its beginnings, we would suggest that it not be taken into account now. And with respect to, we would feel that capacity building would be the route to go, as was suggested earlier. Thank you.
Thank you, Cameroon. I give the floor to Burkina Faso.
Merci.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Burkina Faso is taking the floor for the first time at this standing committee. We would like to thank you for having taken on chairing SC 77. We would also like to thank the Secretariat and our Swiss hosts for all the preparatory work done for us. Madam Chair, the exploitation authorization given to some range states of Pterocarpus erinaceus that do not have NDFs or LAFs that are valid does give rise to a certain number of questions in other countries. We would therefore like to express our support for Senegal's proposal with respect to a regional strategy to protect this species and to suspend its harvesting while awaiting the relevant documentation. We would also support a technical capacity building workshop for the range states in question. This would mean that they would be able to actually be prepared to deal with the missing NDFs and LAFs. Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Burkina Faso. I give the floor to Ghana.
Thank you, Chair. This is the first time we're making comments, and therefore we would like to stand by the existing protocol. Yes, Ghana, as a range state, has progressed tremendously in our effort to comply with all the requirements set by
the Secretariat. We have submitted our NDF and LAF and are waiting for consideration by the Plan Committee as well as the Standing Committee. I think we support Sierra Leone and Cameroon for their intervention because we have also ensured that the sustainable harvesting and trade of the species is maintained, and therefore we have policies and working activities that are in consonance with achieving the requirements. We have the wood tracking system. We have the VPA, which we had with the EU, and is coming on board sometime in February next year. We have also started plantations in the species. We are conducting research to get ourselves informed much more with the ecology and the agronomy of the plant. We also have, communicated with our rural communities that are close to the resource. We have engaged them, and we are doing all efforts to ensure that the species is sustainably harvested and traded. And so we believe that when the Plan Committee looks at our document, they'll be able to pass our document for us to start trade. Even though now we have voluntarily taken the zero quota, we believe that with the documents submitted, the Plan Committee as well as the Standing Committee will approve our stand. We are not just harvesting these plants from the land, but we also have a huge stock that is coming from the inundation of the Volta Lake since we constructed the dam. And because of that, there has been issues with using the lake for transport. There has been occasions where people have lost their lives, and I think every year it is estimated that about 100 people lose their lives because of the stamps that are in the inundated area of the lake. And therefore, we have a group that is ensuring that all the stocks that are in the inundated areas are removed to ensure smooth passage of the water transport systems. And so we have developed a quota system that we think if we, the SC and Plan Committee approves, we'll be able to sustainably manage and trade in the species. Thank you.
Thank you, Ghana. Any more comments from observer parties? Nigeria, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me the floor. Nigeria would like to support Senegal on their document 33.2.1, particularly addressing the existing stockpiles of the rosewood. it is essential that the Standing Committee be notified of existing stockpiles so that the specimen in question do not perpetuate the illegal and unsustainable trade that has only recently been addressed through the coordinated regional approach. And we are also asking that assistance be given to range states, guidance be given on the issue of how to manage and secure these stockpiles to ensure that future harvest and trade in rosewood is both sustainable and legal in compliance with CITES requirements. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigeria. I'm going to open the floor to observer organizations. I give the floor to the Center for International Environmental Law.
Thank you, Chair. This intervention is made on behalf of CIEL, EIA, SSN, and WWF. As this is our first intervention, we would like to congratulate the Chair and wish Dr. Rosemary Nail a speedy recovery, and thank the Secretariat for the organization of the meeting, as well as the government of Switzerland for hosting. We appreciate the work of range states and the Secretariat, some updates of which we've heard from interventions today, in their efforts to address unsustainable and illegal logging and trade in Pterocarpus erinaceus. We support the proposed additional recommendation by Senegal, as well as the suggestion by Canada to include the recommendations in paragraph 19B and C from document 33.1, as well as the intervention by the United States. We do agree that it would be premature to resume legal trade prior to the workshop and addressing the issues that have been raised. Furthermore, authorizing stockpile exports without those NDFs and LAFs for the timber risks undermining the Article 13 process, resulting in further illegal and unsustainable trade as encountered by EIA in multiple field investigations in range states. We do commend the proposed workshop as an initial step towards meeting the NDF and LAF needs of range states, while noting that additional support is still needed. We would like to conclude by reminding parties that there is no legal trade currently authorized, aside from the approved pre-convention stockpile exports from Guinea. And so consequently, any imports that come from range states are in violation of the convention. Thank you.
Thank you. I next give the floor to Traffic.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Traffic is pleased to underscore the ongoing collaboration between the CITES Secretariat and Traffic in relation to the implementation of Decision 19243, for which we are actively engaged in the compilation of available information pertaining to rosewood species, including, of course, Pterocarpus erinaceus. This endeavor is intended to provide the essential elements for the development of non-detriment findings in alignment with the provisions of Resolution Conf 16.7. Due consideration is also being given to other available guidance, such as the FAO guidelines for the management of tropical forests and the 9-step process for developing scientifically based NDFs for timber species, jointly developed by BFN and Traffic. We encourage the West African range states encompassing the rosewood range to actively utilize this information intended to streamline the development of NDFs for these species when it becomes available. Additionally, we urge them to consider the results of the forthcoming International Expert Workshop on NDFs, set to take place in Nairobi in early December. We emphasize the importance of states tailoring these findings to suit the specific species and context. In this regard, we strongly encourage the Standing Committee to welcome the proposed regional workshop as it presents a valuable opportunity for this purpose. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Traffic. Any additional comments on the document? Okay, so give me 1 second, and then I will propose we take the recommendations country by country, starting with the Secretariat's document. Okay, thank you, committee, and I will go through these systematically, and we will open the floor for specific comments and edits as we go through. I'm going to take this very slow. So we will start with the proposal from the last document that was proposed by Canada to insert recommendations B and C from document 33.11, paragraph 19, into like right above paragraph 67. And I would like to see folks' thoughts on that. I'm going to take that in conjunction with the proposal from China to amend recommendation C to end after sustainability and encourages parties to consider. That is struck out through the remainder of the paragraph. And so I'm looking to the Standing Committee for their thoughts on those two proposals to start the discussion on this document. the United States.
Thank you, Chair. Speaking for the North America region, we align, of course, with Canada as a party and to the North America region on inserting recommendations B and C from document 33.11. And we would like to ask for clarification just to make sure we understand China's recommendation to amend recommendation C to remove. Can you help us further understand? Thank you.
So the proposal from China, the recommendation is to reduce recommendation C to B. The committee invites the importing parties to share with the Secretariat the administrative, legislative, and enforcement arrangements put in place to sanction illegal trade in specimens of Pterocarpus erinaceus, including any relevant due diligent measures to verify legality and ensure sustainability, period. The remainder of the paragraph, they recommend deleting. So committee, there's two proposals. One is to transpose wholly, recommendation B and C, and the other one is to truncate recommendation C. Since I don't see any support for the proposal from China, we will keep them as they are, recommendation B and C from document 3311, and insert those right at paragraph, before paragraph 67 in the document. Okay, so the next set of recommendations that we will take up is the recommendations for Gambia, paragraph little a. Any comments on these recommendations? I'd also, prior to Gambia, is there any further comments on paragraph 67 regarding no further recommendations in regard to Cote d'Ivoire, Guinea, Niger, and Senegal under the present agenda item? Does the Standing Committee agree with that recommendation? I believe Belgium supported it in their initial intervention. Okay. The Standing Committee agrees on that recommendation in paragraph 67. Now we'll move to the Gambian recommendations. Any comments on these? China?
Thank you, Madam Chair. China still like to emphasize, I would like to mention that in the first session of a TESA TESA program, initiated from 2023, China supports researchers from Nigeria to conduct a cooperative study on NDF of Pterocarpus erinaceus. Very welcome other range states to apply for the following sessions of a TESA program. Considering various efforts and significant progress in this regard, and concerning current limited resources of funding for CITES Secretariat, China suggests again to delete the second part of paragraph 19C, originally in document 13.3.11. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, China. I did not see any agreement for that deletion from the committee, but it will be noted. And I don't see any opposition to the recommendations for Gambia. And so the committee agrees to these recommendations in subparagraph A. I'll turn next to the recommendations for Guinea-Bissau in subparagraph B. Any comments, edits to these recommendations? The committee agrees to the recommendations for Guinea-Bissau in subparagraph B. Next, we'll do the recommendations for Mali in subparagraph C. Any comments or edits to the recommendations in subparagraph C? The United States.
Thank you, Chair. We had a technical correction to Mali's recommendation number 2 to reflect that the Plants Committee is responsible for the non-detriment finding. And so we would suggest the wording change to add under number 2, note that the Plants Committee accepted that the NDF presented by Mali, etc. Thank you.
Any other comments on the Mali recommendations? The committee agrees with the recommendations in subparagraph C for Mali, with the edit from the United States for subparagraph little I, with the addition of notes that the Plants Committee, and then accepted that the NDF presented by Mali. Next, we'll tackle the recommendations for Nigeria in subparagraph D. Any comments on the recommendations for Nigeria? Okay, the committee agrees to the recommendations for Nigeria in subparagraph D. Next, it will be the recommendations for Cameroon, the Central African Republic, Chad, and Togo in subparagraph E. Any comments on that recommendation in subparagraph E? Seeing no comments, the committee agrees to the recommendations in subparagraph E. Next, the recommendations for Benin in subparagraph F. Any comments on the recommendations for Benin in subparagraph F? The committee agrees to the recommendations for Benin in subparagraph F. Next is the recommendations for Burkina Faso in subparagraph G. Any comments on the recommendations for Burkina Faso in subparagraph G? With no comments, the committee agrees to the recommendations in subparagraph G for Burkina Faso. Next is the recommendations for Ghana in subparagraph H. Are there any comments regarding the recommendations for Ghana in subparagraph H? With no comments to the recommendation, the committee agrees to the recommendations for Ghana in subparagraph H. Next is the recommendations for Sierra Leone in paragraph I, subparagraph I. Any comments on the recommendations in subparagraph I? With no comments, the committee agrees to the recommendations for Sierra Leone in subparagraph I. Finally, we come to recommendation subparagraph J. Any comments on the recommendation subparagraph J? With no, the United States.
Thank you, Chair. On behalf of the North America region, we had 2 recommendations for tweaks, but it would apply to multiple countries. And I just wanted to note that for whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Can I clarify the United States for the subparagraphs we went through? We want to make edits to those.
Chair, we had a suggestion on a suggestion for a recommendation for Benin, Burkina Faso, Ghana, Nigeria, and Sierra Leone.
United States, where you can present that suggestion to the committee?
Thank you. We wanted to note that the Plants Committee had suggested 2 long-term and 2 short-term recommendations to the range states, and we wanted to point out that recommendation A has been completed, but recommendation B, which is a short-term recommendation, has not been fulfilled in some cases. And so we had a small edit to suggest that B could be retained, and this would apply to Benin, Burkina Faso, Ghana, Nigeria, and Sierra Leone. And so we have a text edit that would suggest where it says, recommend the retention of the RST recommendations. We would take out long-term there and put in recommend the retention of the RST recommendations B through D. And I'm happy to repeat if that's useful.
Just give me 1 second.
Thank you.
to say it.
So the committee has already agreed to these recommendations, but I'd like to acknowledge that there could have been a comment made in the beginning of this discussion by Belgium regarding this issue. And I'd like to ask Belgium, were these points that you made in the beginning of your intervention when we first opened discussion for the floor, regarding Benin, Ghana, and Sierra Leone? These were this would be the same issue. Okay. So if the committee agrees to reopen this issue, we can make these edits. I'm going to take silence as consensus, and so we will reopen this issue and take the edits that were proposed by Belgium as well as the United States. Give me 1 second to summarize. Belgium, are you able to repeat that portion of your intervention? Country by country, please.
Yes, thank you. So for the countries Benin, Burkina Faso, Ghana, and Sierra Leone, the intervention made was to say that Part A of the Plans Committee recommendations have been started, but the Plans Committee recommendations B to D are still outstanding. I think that was the main change we would like to see. Yeah, thank you.
I'm going to ask the United States if you can just run through your edits, just country by country, and please indicate what subparagraph you are looking for that change.
Thank you, Chair. My sincere apologies. We wish to align with Belgium's recommendation on this and in full agreement with that. Thank you.
Okay. So going back to Nigeria also, or no, Nigeria. So starting with the country-specific recommendations for Benin, the committee agrees to these recommendations with the edit in subparagraph III, recommend the retention of the long-term recommendations B through D. Short and long-term recommendations in B through D. Okay, next, for the recommendations for Burkina Faso, subparagraph G, the committee agrees to the recommendations with the edit in subparagraph II to recommend the retention of the short and long-term RST recommendations B through D. For Ghana, the committee agrees to the recommendations in subparagraph F H, with the edit in paragraph 2, recommend the retention of the short and long-term RST recommendations B through D. And for Sierra Leone, in subparagraph I, the committee agrees to the recommendations with the edit in subparagraph 1, acknowledge, oh, wait. Okay, subparagraph I as written, is that correct? Or can someone provide the place where they want the insertion of B through D for the short and long-term recommendations? I give the floor to Belgium.
Yes, so the change should be the same for each country I mentioned before. No?
The recommendations for Benin, Burkina Faso, and Ghana are similar. However, they are different for Sierra Leone.
Ja?
Belgium?
Thank you, and apologies for not being clear from the first time. So we recognize that the short-term recommendation, paragraph A, was implemented, and we also recognize that progress has been made for recommendations B through D, but they're not fully accomplished yet. So this should also be reflected in the recommendation. So it could be something like further acknowledge the significant progress made in delivering the short and long-term recommendations B through D, while recognizing that there's still some outstanding work or something to that effect. Thank you.
So I propose if we leave the recommendation little I as it's stated in the Secretariat's recommendation and simply insert little I, and do some renumbering and insert recommend the retention of the short and long-term RSD recommendations B through D. And so they're similar throughout all of the countries that works. Okay, thank you. And so the final recommendation in this document is recommendation J. And I'm going to turn it over to the Secretariat to provide some information.
Thank you, Chair. Turning to recommendation J, just to remind the committee, the current recommendation J is the Standing Committee is invited to consider the way forward proposed by the Secretariat in paragraph 66 of document SC 77 Doc 33.2.3 Rev 1 for an integrated range state approach in addressing NDF's and LAF's recommendations under the expedited Article 13 procedure and the RST process, and the organization of a regional workshop on NDF and LAF for pterocarpus erinaceus range states. The Secretariat wanted to submit to the committee a possible rewording of these recommendations in light of the discussions held. New recommendation J would read, the Standing Committee requests the Secretariat to organize a regional workshop on NDF and LAF for pterocarpus erinaceus range states, thus adopting an integrated range state approach in addressing NDF's and LAF's recommendation under the expedited Article 13 procedure and the RST process. And that would be followed by an additional recommendation K, which would read, the Standing Committee requests the Secretariat to take into consideration the discussions at the 77th meeting of the Standing Committee and to liaise with the chairs of the Standing Committee and the Plans Committee on the preparations for and the program for the workshop. I can reread that if necessary, but that would be a new wording proposed by the Secretariat. So I repeat, new recommendation J would read, the Standing Committee requests the Secretariat to organize a regional workshop on NDF and LAF for pterocarpus erinaceus range states, thus adopting an integrated range state approach in addressing NDF and LAF recommendations under the expedited Article 13 procedure and the RST process. And that would be followed by an additional recommendation K, which would read, the Standing Committee requests the Secretariat to take into consideration the discussions at the 77th meeting of the Standing Committee and to liaise with the chairs of the Standing Committee and the Plans Committee on the preparation for and the program for the workshop. Thank you.
And so I'm taking comments on the revised decision, recommendation J, as well as the new recommendation K. And I would just like to thank the interpreters for agreeing to stay an additional 10 minutes while we wrap up discussions on this document. I'm first going to take any comments on these from the Standing Committee. I give the floor to Senegal.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam. I simply wished to recall that Senegal had made a recommendation which has not been reconsidered. It has not come up yet in the summary of recommendations. Was this just by omission? I would be grateful if we could take this up.
Not by omission. We're going to do recommendation J and K as proposed by the Secretariat, and then your recommendation would be a draft recommendation L, and so that would be the final recommendation in the document to take up. I give the floor to Benin.
Okay. Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam. I wonder whether it might be possible to add something to what the Secretariat proposed. Above and beyond workshops on NDFs, there's another vital consideration for range states, and that is inventories, actually knowing your potential. How can you have an NDF if you don't know what you have? I think that that would be useful, and I would like to draw the Secretariat's attention to the need to find funding for these range states so that they are in a position to draw up inventories and have a real understanding of what the potential is for their species in their states. That is vital when it comes to actually drafting NDFs. Thank you.
Thank you, Benin. So turning back to the Standing Committee, I see that there is agreement on J and K, United States, there's agreement. Okay, so the Standing Committee agrees to the recommendations J and K as introduced by the Secretariat, introduced and revised by the Secretariat. And so we will now take up the recommendation from Senegal from when they introduced the document. I'll turn to the Secretariat to read that out to the committee.
Thank you, Chair. There was a call in the beginning to have this reread, so I'll do that now. This Senegal proposed a new recommendation reading as follows. Aside from the previously approved exports from the pre-convention stockpile from Guinea, set out a notification to the parties number 2022/023, legal trade Enterocarpus erinaceus not resume until after results and recommendations from the regional workshop have been reviewed by the Standing and Plants Committees and addressed by the range states to the satisfaction of the committees. Thank you.
So looking to the Standing Committee for their comments on the draft recommendation proposed by Senegal. I would just like to recall that when that was brought up, I believe there was a few range states that spoke against this recommendation, specifically Cameroon, Ghana, and Sierra Leone. I'm going to give the floor to the Secretariat regarding this new recommendation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to invite the attention of the committee that this recommendation from Senegal is in contradiction with the decisions that you have just taken about the countries like Mali, where you are indicating the process that should be followed and that is already explained in notification to the parties 2022/45 that explains what are the requirements. So we brought the attention of the committee to the importance of following due process and following what you have recommended before and what parties are implementing now, because this new recommendation will alter what you have decided before, and that was the instruction received by parties concerned by this expedited process that is already quite complex to manage. And if you move the goalpost at every meeting, that will be very complicated for the parties to comply with your recommendations. Thank you very much.
And so I'm going to open the floor to the Standing Committee as well as observer parties. Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. And echoing a little bit of what the Secretariat said, we don't support this additional recommendation. We think the recommendations that have already been agreed have provided a good basis of understanding for the conditions under which we would consider removing the suspensions of trade, and they are linked in particular to the legal acquisition findings and the non-detriment findings, so the core aspects of the convention. So we think this new recommendation is unnecessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Canada. I give the floor to Belgium.
Thank you, and apologies for being a bit slow in processing the consequences of the proposal by Senegal. So we agree to what Canada just mentioned, and thanks also to the Secretariat for explaining this in full. So we do not feel that this recommendation put forward by Senegal should be adopted. Thank you.
Any additional comments on the recommendation? Cameroon, you have the floor.
Merci.
Thank you, Madam. I fully support what Canada has just said. I simply would say that it is important to consult before making suggestions that concern all range states. So I don't think that Senegal really did their preparatory work on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Cameroon. And so with no agreement, no support for the additional recommendation from the Standing Committee, the Standing Committee does not agree to the additional recommendation provided by Senegal. So after taking up the recommendations in the Secretariat's report, it is my proposal and that we do not need to go through the summaries and recommendations in Doc 33.2.1 submitted by Senegal and the recommendations in 33.2.2 submitted by Sierra Leone. Is the committee in agreement with that? Okay, with silence as consensus, the committee agrees that there is no need to take up the recommendations in 33.21 and 33.22. Thank you. Just a quick note that we will start tomorrow's agenda with CITES and Forest. Any information from the Secretariat for the committee? Just again, thank you to the interpreters for giving us a few extra minutes to wrap up this document. We appreciate it. Have a good evening, everyone, and I'll see you tomorrow morning.